Thank you and welcome to this PRCA Technology Group webinar on audience ambiguity. Delighted to have you all here. We're hoping for a really good session. It's being recorded as well, so hopefully that's okay with everybody. And the video will be posted on the PRCA website and socials in a few days' time, so keep an eye out for that when it goes live. So I just wanted to introduce myself quickly before we get on to the esteemed panelists here. I'm Conrad Arnavutian. I'm the co-chair of the PRCA Technology Group, and I'm also senior vice president at Mike Worldwide's communications as well. I'd like to thank Will Cook and Kiri. So Will Cook's the co-chair of the PRCA Tech Group, and Kiri heads up groups here at the PRCA. They're helping support this. It wouldn't be possible without your help and support. So thank you to both of you. We do run these events regularly at the PRCA, and we're always keen for people to be involved. So if you like what you hear and like what you see, and you'd like to be a panelist or get involved in the tech group, just shoot myself, Will, or Kiri a note, and we'd be happy to have a conversation. So just a quick bit of housekeeping before we get started. We're going to do about 30 minutes of the webinar with the panelists here, and then we're going to move into about 10 to 15 minutes of questions, Q&As at the end as well. So if you do have a question, you've got two ways of doing it. You can pop it in the chat function below on Zoom, or you can go to the Q&A section and ask your questions there. I will monitor for both of those as we go along, and I will try my best to get to as many as I can before the time's up. So, without further ado, today's session, we're going to be looking at how technology is forcing communicators to rethink the way we deliver and distribute messages. Who's our real true audience? Who are we actually communicating to? Where's our content going? Is the proliferation of AI forcing us to communicate more for machines or for humans? Interesting question. We know that AI is having an increasingly influential impact on the way we do comms, the way we live as PR folk and practitioners. And I imagine, in fact, I know that we're not the only industry that is learning as we go from this. And many of us probably feel the AI race is moving faster than a lot of us can keep up with. So we don't just want another webinar on AI. I'm sure many of you have already had that already and been there and done that. So we've assembled a brilliant team. They're going to introduce themselves in a second. A brilliant team with varying roles, responsibilities, backgrounds, and also generations as well, just to help us navigate that question of audience ambiguity. So I'll hand over to Jo, first of all, to introduce herself.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. So my name is Jo Sutherland, and I'm Managing Director of Magenta Associates. So we are a B2B PR and comms firm, and we are also a B Corp, so like to do the right thing. On top of that, I'm also an AI ethics researcher, currently reading for a master's in the topic at the University of Cambridge. I also do quite a lot of work with the University of Sussex, and we have worked together on where industry meets academic research projects, looking at how generative AI specifically is influencing communications. So bit of an AI nerd, but my background is in comms. I've been doing this for 15 years. So yeah, excited about the conversation today.
Brilliant. Sal, over to you.
Yeah, so I'm Sal Viveros. So I have over 15 years experience leading comms functions. So at big brands, I've worked at AWS, Intel, McAfee, and Avanti. As part of that, I've always led the internal teams, but actually just now starting to head up a company called Salient Intelligence. As part of my career, I've always been tech forward. And so obviously in the last 2 years, AI is an important part of that, how organizations need to think up through AI, but also was part of the AI ethics board within Avanti, and really kind of drove that project too. So that's me.
Thanks, Sal. Monique, over to you.
Yeah, thanks. So hi everyone. I'm Monique. So I'm an account manager at Milk and Honey PR, which is a B Corp comms agency, and I also sit on the Taylor Bennett Foundation's alumni advisory board. So at Milk and Honey, my remit spans across sort of like B2B and consumer PR, but I originally started my comms journey in-house. So I've worked at the likes of like BT, AWS, and my background is predominantly tech heavy. Definitely don't have as much experience as Jo and Sal. The digital native here, the Gen Z perspective. But yeah, that's a little bit about me.
I like how you didn't include me in that bucket, Monique. That's thank you. So let's thank you for the intros, guys. Let's get started. I'd like to just kick off talking about whether communicators are now influencing systems as much as people. It goes back to our initial webinar title, actually. So I'd like to ask each of you, and perhaps Sal, we can start with you, whether you believe that the algorithm is becoming this new audience for PR, or are we simply just overstating the mark here a little bit? What are your initial thoughts?
Yeah, actually, I think we're understating the marker a bit. When people are now searching or researching a brand, a company, a product, they're now going to ChatGPT. They're going to Claude. They're going to Perplexity. They're going to Google AI. And even when they Google, they just read the summaries. So we need to make sure that we understand how machines are taking the information. But again, luckily, earned media is critical and has the recency and the credibility. So it's still scoring high within the LLM. So I think, PR and what our teams do is critical to the LLMs getting better information.
Interesting. So, Joe, Sal thinks we're understating things. Oh, do you agree with that, or do you disagree?
My answer is sort of. Probably quite irritating. But yeah, look, for me, your question was, do we believe the algorithm is becoming a new audience for PR? So I would actually resist the word audience. So the algorithm isn't an audience; it's an intermediary. It's like a new gatekeeper, right? Sitting between you and the person you're actually trying to reach, the way an editor or journalist does. So yes, I do agree with Sal in that we need to write with that intermediary in mind. But I think there's a bit of a warning here. Like the moment you start treating the machine or the algorithm as the audience, you've sort of lost the plot, right? In both senses of the phrase, the storytelling bit and everything else. Because the machine, it doesn't buy anything. It doesn't trust anything. It doesn't change its mind. Well, not yet anyway. The machines we're currently using. But the human on the other side still does. So Magenta's own research, we looked at the B2B buyer journey, and it found that 2/3 of B2B decision makers are already using tools like ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, etc., to research suppliers. But they're using them to reach a decision that they will obviously make as people. So I agree it's the new gatekeeper, yes, but I wouldn't say it's the new audience. And I think there's a lot more nuance to how communicators need to be dealing with both sides of that.
Interesting take. And Monique, I'd love to hear your thoughts as well. Are you thinking about this from a new gatekeeper or a new audience perspective, or do you have an issue with the premise of the question itself as well?
I honestly feel like Joe has said everything that I want to say. So it's like, what else can I add? I definitely think it's a factor, and I definitely think it's something to be aware of. I think from a Gen Z perspective, when I think about algorithms, it's kind of already naturally built into what I do. Like if I see something going viral on like Instagram or on a social media platform, my brain thinks about, oh, can we do something similar, rather than sort of like breaking it down and thinking, okay, well, what words did they use? What sounds did they use? How can we sort of like leverage it? I think for me, it's a bit more of like a natural instinct, and it's not so much conscious. So I think in that way, algorithms are like a great like consideration, and they're, when we're thinking about like the audience, it's like Joe said, I think it's a sort of a like a balance. But to me, it's no different than, for example, if I'm pitching like a news editor, I know not to pitch them at like 6 p.m. Or if I'm going to do a post on LinkedIn, I know not to do it at like 8 p.m. on the Sunday. And so I think these are things we've always done, but there hasn't really been a name for it. But then again, to Sal's point, if an AI assistant or like chatbot or something recommends a competitor instead of your client, then in that sense, your client becomes like invisible, and the person who's doing the research doesn't even know they've missed them. So there is a balance, but I do think it's just something that's always been there. We're just now entering a sort of more like technical digital age where we're kind of putting names on things that don't really need names.
Yes, a lot of names have been given to it. We look at generative engine optimization, and so on and so forth. But you mentioned a point there, just around brand discoverability, and how your business shows up in these platforms. So Sal, I'm just wondering from your perspective as an in-house comms pro, how much are you thinking about discoverability inside AI-powered search, or AI-powered assistance when planning campaigns?
Yeah, I mean that's critical. I mean, I think most companies probably started doing this a year ago, I'd hope. But marketing is changing. It's shifted. So before you'd optimize for SEO, you'd optimize for humans. Now you really need to optimize across the platform. So obviously for humans, but also for the algorithms, for the LLMs, the answer engines, the analysts, again, making sure you have thought leadership. And now there's even autonomous buying programs. So again, making sure that you create a good story, but then you're optimizing that story to be read and captured by these various search engines. Because again, if you're not discoverable, then you could be invisible.
That's a really good point, and that point there around optimization is really important. And Joe, I guess from your standpoint, you obviously worked a lot in ethics and AI ethics specifically, but from an optimization perspective, what worries you most about optimizing for machines specifically? Do we risk losing that authenticity and transparency piece?
Yeah, I think two things worry me, and they're probably quite linked actually. So the first is that, yeah, like you suggested, in optimizing for machines, we might like optimize the meaning right out of our work. If we write purely to be legible to a machine, we might end up with content that might rank, with jury's out on that one. No one's really got the answers to GEO at the moment, but we might rank, but we might not say anything. It might be kind of nothingy what we're saying, because of the way these systems work. It's all probability, the next probable word, etc. So if we follow suit, do we strip the meaning out of our work? And what makes communications really special, in my view, is that we are storytellers, right? So I think communicators should stand behind something worth reading, not just optimizing for optimization's sake. So that's the first. And I guess it links to the skill set and how you go about using the tools and also optimizing for them. But still, it's still a worry. And the second is probably transparency as well, which is a bit of a loaded topic. And I know I haven't got long, so I'll just kind of cement what I'm thinking here. So we did some research with the University of Sussex a couple of years ago called Cheat GPT, obviously pun intended. And it found that a lot of content writers, 80%, we surveyed 1,000 content writers within the PR sphere, and 80% of them were using Gen AI, but they weren't disclosing it. So only 1 in 5, I think it was, I told their line manager, and even less. So 1 in 10 in agency side, only 1 in 10 had disclosed AI use to their clients. So I think the real risk isn't the optimizing itself. We should be doing that. Like Sal said, we don't want to be invisible. I mean, it defeats what we do, right? But it's how we go about it. And if we do it quietly without governance, without telling anyone, and if we use these tools in a sloppy way or forget about the human bit, we erode the one thing we actually sell, which in my view is trust, right? That's what PR should be about. So authenticity, it isn't a vibe, or it shouldn't be. For B Corps like Magenta and Milk and Honey with Monique on here, it should be the business model. So I guess, those are my 2 main concerns about optimizing just for the machines.
Yeah, and they seem like very valid concerns as well. And Monique, I'm just wondering from your perspective, from a digital native communicator like yourself entering the industry, does that shift feel natural to you? And do you think younger PR pros are, I guess, instinctively creating content differently for that reason?
I would say so, yes. I think the sort of era of comms that we grew up in definitely sort of was sort of like grown and sort of like molded off the back of like the internet and like social media, and I've grown up using social media as well, so there wasn't that aspect of having to sort of like learn how to create content on social media. If anything, it was like almost like when you learn a language, that's basically how it was, almost like second nature, I would say. And I even remember like old chatbots, like I don't know if anyone remembers like the AOL chatbot, and you could speak to it and it was like really, really bad, but even just stuff like that. And so my understanding of like communications is all around structuring comms for like feeds, for like quick access, or for things that are easily digestible, rather than thinking about, will this go in like a newspaper or a sort of longer form article. And that's not to say that digital natives don't think that way. That's just sort of like my thought process. But I actually think the shift is, yes, in the content, but it's also in like the audience. I think nowadays we're seeing more people are sort of like streaming rather than like watching news or like TV. We're watching YouTube. We're getting our information from like TikTok and Instagram, and attention spans are getting shorter, and people are tuning into to podcasts as their source of truth. And I think younger communicators are sort of like, yes, creating differently because of things like AI and the rise of like technology itself, but also the audience for comms and for storytelling has changed, and that's an audience that we grew up in. And I think like a great example, like a personal example, is that I like followed this tattoo artist on Instagram for like years. And I trusted the credibility of her like social platform, of the content that she created on a platform that I mentioned I've grown up and trusted. And then I went to her to get like my first tattoo. If I would have seen that in an article in a newspaper, maybe I might have looked at that and been like, I don't know how credible that is, because that's not my sort of like, that's not what I grew up in. So I definitely think we think about things differently. I guess also to round off, and again, not to sort of like take too much time, I also think it's really important to caveat that I think there is a big difference between sort of like being a digital native and thinking differently about content, but then also actually being algorithm literate and understanding the difference between sort of like, okay, yes, we can use social media, but how LLMs actually work and how we like leverage them as a skill set. And I think that's something that I'm still learning and actively building. So it's kind of a, yes, we think differently, but also, no, I don't know how that technical thing works. I'm still learning. Like, we can learn together,
Sure, and yeah, we're all still learning. And I remember, you mentioned the AOL chatbot there. I remember the word paperclip. So we've all come a very, very long way since then. No matter what generation we're from. I'd like to change tack a little bit. But thank you for all your thoughts on the audience and the algorithms there. Joe, you mentioned storytelling. Traditionally, we've looked at storytelling from a very human-driven or narrative-driven, human-first perspective, very emotional. But if AI tools are summarizing, interpreting, and filtering this information before the audience actually sees it, surely storytelling itself needs to evolve along with it. Joe, what do you think effective storytelling looks like in a world where AI is that first interpreter of what gets pushed out?
Yeah, I think effective storytelling should do two jobs really. So the first, like you mentioned, is that, yeah, the first reader might be the machine, the algorithm. So it'll summarize you, interpret you, decide whether you are worth surfacing, all of that stuff. So I guess to storytell for that, we need to think about clarity, and structure. They really matter. Perhaps more than they did, but perhaps not sure. I don't think we always need to keep reinventing the wheel here, but either way, clarity and structure are important here. Like, you're aiming to be quotable and ambiguous, make your point retrievable, and yeah, just worth someone's time really, regardless of the fact that it's for the first reader, which is the machine. But I think, kind of similar to what I was saying before, that machine isn't the thing you're trying to move, right? The human is, and humans don't remember nothingy content, right? They remember a story, like a real one, like a turn of phrase or something that made them feel something, or lean in, I don't know, raise an eyebrow, laugh even. So yeah, even though you might be writing for the first reader, it still needs to kind of tell that story so it holds the attention of the humans, right? So I think it should do both. I think it should be legible for the machine, but human enough to make the story worth telling in the first place. So I guess my advice is, like, in other words, sort of write so the machine can find you, but make sure that when the human arrives, there's actually something there worth their time. I don't think the danger is in AI reading it first. I think it's us writing only for the thing that reads first and forgetting the person it's all supposedly for. So I think for me, the story is still the point. The machine's just like the new doorway to it.
Okay, so it feels more two-step than it perhaps has before. Sal, would you agree with that assessment of that kind of two-step human and machine piece?
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I think storytelling is more important than ever because customers look for authenticity. People are starting to recognize when something's written by AI. And a lot of times, a lot of people will just immediately discount that. It's like, oh, well, that doesn't really matter to me. So making sure that you have a good story that resonates, again, like Joe mentioned, you relate to, there's some emotional connection, makes it much more powerful. But that said, you can also optimize the content. So it's readable from machines as well as humans. I think the goal shouldn't be to write to the bots. The goal should be to write clearly so that both the bots and people clearly understand it. And again, storytelling can be part of that. I don't think they exclude each other.
Mm. Okay, and Monique, I'm interested in your perspective as well. I mean, you've grown up in a world of algorithms, feeds, and recommendation engines. Do younger communicators such as yourself, do you think differently about storytelling and the way you're creating content now and how you talk about the brands that you work with?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's kind of like what I was saying in my earlier point about the way that we think is sort of like reels and like carousels and threads and thinking less about how we communicate in a more traditional sense and how we can sort of like reach all of these like audiences on like a Substack or a Reddit. But I also think because I was quite fortunate when I started comms, the people that I learned from had experienced sort of like traditional PR, the sort of like interpersonal aspect that I got to sort of learn what it is to tell a story, to tell a narrative where I guess the you're not getting all the information in the first sort of like 30 seconds, but it sort of takes you on a journey. In addition to sort of I guess where I've now grown up where like you get information within like 5 seconds or I don't know, your brain shuts off. So yes, we're definitely thinking about storytelling differently when it comes to sort of like algorithms, but I also think there's a risk in sort of like optimizing for algorithms when it comes to sort of like authorship, but also losing like our own sort of like authentic voice entirely. I think when we're like to Joe's point, I think AI does a really great job of like democratizing access to like information and everyone can access it, but then do we risk when we're starting using these algorithms and thinking about, okay, let's storytell for this purpose that everyone sort of like sounds the same? And I feel like our unique voice is our sort of biggest asset. And slowly, one thing at least I've noticed throughout my sort of like career trajectory is that we're kind of optimizing that out of existence. So I think from like a digital native perspective, we think in the fact of, okay, how can we make this scalable? How can we make this reach different audiences? But also, how can we stay, true to ourselves and true to our own voice, especially in a world where like I don't know if you use an M dash, people are like, you're AI, and it's like I was using this before it came. So yeah, I do feel like at least in my perspective, like the best communicators are the people who can do both at once and creating something that's like emotionally compelling for humans, but then also clear enough for like algorithms to pick it up.
Absolutely. It's a really good point. And you mentioned Substack in your answer there as well, Monique. And we are seeing this increase, I'm sure yourself and Joe and others agency side, this shift towards owned content to help optimize best for GEO and AEO. So I'd just like to move on to the other side of that coin, so the earned media, and what a lot of us kind of dine out on. It's what we have to do for clients around storytelling is that earned media piece, and that being the gold standard in PR. But if audiences are increasingly consuming that information through AI generated summaries rather than clicking the actual source of the article directly, what does that influence actually look like now? Who are we talking to? So, Sal, do you think that we are, or do you think that earned media is still that dominant currency of influence? You actually talked a little bit about it earlier, or are we entering a new model here entirely? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think at least for now, earned media is still important currency.
Mm.
The main reason being is that earned media earns credibility and recency, which are really important to every LLM. So making sure that you have a steady stream of coverage is still critical to scoring well and rank higher within the LLMs. So again, for now, I think it's still the gold standard, and I think the importance of earned media I think has become more important because of this. Earned and owned right now I think are the big levers that people can pull to become more visible within the LLMs.
Monique, what are your thoughts there? Do you think it's still that? Do you think it's still really important, or is it on par with owned? What's your take there?
I feel like earned media is still like gold. I think it's still is really valuable for like clients and also for algorithms as well. I think like one thing I've seen from like the PR side is that with earned media, that it still is driving sort of like brand visibility and sort of like searchability within like AI tools. But where there is like specifically focusing on like AI and intelligent technology, where there is that oversaturation, I mean, absolutely everywhere, to the point where we're reaching out to journalists with a great story and they're like, everyone's got an AI solution, what makes yours better? Then using the likes of like paid media or creators, influencers really does help like sort of like cut through that noise, and also get organizations sort of like their narrative out there. So yes, earned is still gold, but there are other options that are cropping up that will help sort of like bring businesses' narrative to the forefront of that conversation, and also to sort of like, I guess, like break through the noise, like through like algorithms on the likes of like LinkedIn or like social media and stuff, like bump their stuff to the top, basically.
Yeah, and that integrated piece is becoming increasingly important. And I think earned is still obviously that real catalyst for storytelling, but a campaign won't really go anywhere unless you have that integrated mindset. So I think that's a really good point there as well, Monique. Joe, I just touching on that then, I'm thinking about it from a measurement perspective. So how is this going to shape up this move towards algorithms and AI when communicating with clients? So if visibility happens inside an AI answer, and as I said, nobody clicks on the actual article, how do we prove that PR value as on the agency side to our clients? What's your take?
Yeah, it's a bit of a headache, isn't it?
Mm.
So, yeah, a large share of AI searches now end without a click. Like you said, the user gets their answer inside that interface and doesn't bother to or doesn't need to click on a link. So, traffic's going down for a lot of organizations, but also publishers, right? So going back to the previous question, I completely agree with what Monique and Sal were saying about the importance of earned coverage, but the media is on its knees at the moment. Most commercial media, I went to the Journalism AI Festival last year, and I think the current reports are traffic's down by 40%, and the majority of editors predict that's going to get even wider. So their commercial model is really stressed and strained right now. So I think naturally we'll need to move to a reciprocal model with paid and earned anyway. But in terms of measurement and how that all fits in, the model we leaned on probably about 20 years with Google, search, traffic, click through, it's obviously weakening. It was always a borrowed platform, that's the thing. But now we have this new gatekeeper, and it's a different set of rules. And even this week with Google, with its decisions it's making and the backlash, and the publishers now having a bit of a yay vote in terms of, they can change what's surfaced in those AI overviews. I mean, it's moving so quickly, right? So in terms of measurement, what do we do? Well, I think there's probably two things. So the first is, I think we need to shift the effort towards earned, fresh, quality coverage in those trusted third-party sources that the systems are drawing on and that the audiences trust, because that's where you surface in the answer when, even if nobody's clicking it, it's still doing the job of getting the brand out there. Second, I think it's about being honest with clients and with your CFO, if you're in-house, about what we're measuring and why, right? So is it presence in the sources that is shaping AI answers? Because if it is, what's the good of that? Because it changes every week, right? Is it share of voice inside those answers? Well, how are you going to do that? It's a different answer for every single user using those interfaces. How can you measure that? Is it the quality of the conversations that follow? Again, most of these systems are quite closed. So they're harder to put on a dashboard, and but they're arguably closer to the truth than a vanity click ever was. But how the hell do you track that? So I don't think we're proving PR value the way we used to, because we can't. But maybe what we're doing now, or what we're being forced to do now, is arguably better, because we're finally getting better at educating those that hold the purse strings, that building and maintaining a reputation, that, making a brand famous for all the right reasons. It's something that can't be costed up and measured in website clicks or engagement or impression or any of those metrics, right? I think PR is increasingly going to be an art and a science moving forwards. But as with any art, there's different interpretations about meaning and place of whatever it is, right? And as with any science, there's a whole load of different factors, let alone methodologies in play to try and actually get any proper answers and numbers. So I don't think a set of numbers will cut it moving forward. So I think we have to find a more nuanced, sophisticated way of communicating the the benefits of PR, what it can do, but all while supporting our media friends and thinking about this integrated paid and earned reciprocal model. So we've got quite a challenge on our hands.
That's your post-webinar homework there, Joe, right there, to come up with the answer for the whole of the PR industry. But no, all very valid points. And I think what I'd love to do now is just help close the discussion. We've come to really interesting thoughts and provoking opinions here. But I guess just in no more than a sentence, I'd like just to ask you guys, in the context of today's conversation, to give me one sentence, and I'm trying not to sound overly facetious here, but one sentence that summarizes whether you think we are still shaping public opinion, or are we now shaping the systems that shape public opinion? Sal, did you want to take this one first off?
Sure. So I would say most companies don't understand the changes well enough yet to change the system. But I think learning the LLMs and learning the processes that they use will help them then be able to shape public opinion. Until you know that, you don't know where you should be going.
Got it. Monique, do you want to take the next one?
Yeah. I guess I would say communication predates the internet. So shaping how people perceive the world will always be a human's job, and it's always something that we will lead in. And I don't think that will change because we have newly smart systems that have only been around for about 2 years. So
Very good. Joe, what are your thoughts?
Okay, one sentence. Here goes. All right. So I think both. We're still shaping public opinion, but we're doing it partly by shaping the systems that shape that public opinion. And the danger of this era is forgetting, A, there's still a human at the end of the chain who's got to be persuaded or influenced. And B, that information integrity, which we haven't had time to cover, but information integrity is in a bad shape right now, right? And our job as communicators is to protect it as much as we protect our organizations' reputations. End of sentence.
There you go. Perfect. Brilliant. Thank you so much, guys. Really, really interesting stuff. I'm going to open up the floor for questions as well now. If you do have one, as I said, please pop it in the chat or on the Q&A section as well. We've had a few questions coming already, so I will just go to those now. Let's go for, okay, it feels like PR is becoming more technical than creative. Do you agree? Who would like to take this one? Do we think it's becoming more technical and engineered rather than creative and maybe even editorial?
Yeah, I mean, I think creativity is still critical for PR. The more you need to have a good story to resonate through all the technicality. As a reporter, again, they're getting the same pitch 100 times. The one that's more creative is going to be the one that I think they react to.
Mm-hmm.
I would also agree with Sal. I think, like, at least from a pitching perspective, I think now where there's oversaturation and everything's the same, we have to be more creative in the comms and storytelling that we do. And not to just repeat what you said, Sal, but I do think there's now even more opportunity to be creative because everything is the same. So yeah, I would say we're leaning more on the creative side and thinking outside of the box.
I like that, Monique, because it talks about opening opportunities where many people see challenges, and I think that's something that we as communicators probably have to look at with the glass half full. I'm just looking as well, just a couple of the questions that have come through. What are your go-to AI tools and methods? What do you use in your jobs to do it best? Joe, I don't know if you want to take this one.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty much signed up to all of them. But let me just talk about the ones I use most. Maybe that's helpful. I guess as an AI researcher, I am on all the tools to learn how they work and to build my own literacy. And I'm also running a course in AI literacy. So the main tools I use, I've recently changed from ChatGPT to Claude. I think a lot of us probably nodding our heads at that one. There's actually quite a funny video going around about it. But I use Claude daily on the chat function, but more as rather than imitation. So I think in AI use, you can either use it to imitate or augment your work. So rather than imitation, like write a press release, I would write the press release in theory, and I would use the AI to challenge me on the perspective in it. So I kind of use it quite a lot in that regard. I'm also using Claude Cowork quite a lot, which is quite interesting for those fiddly admin stuff that we haven't got time to go through 60 odd reports or whatever it is that's in your folder and they need to make sense of. So that's good for kind of research, extraction and stuff like that. I'm a massive fan of Notebook LM. I use it all the time, mainly for my studies actually. I've got quite a long reading list, as you can imagine, and I'm doing this part-time while running a business. So some of the recommended reading, not essential, recommended, I will probably put into the Notebook 11 and turn it into a podcast just to get a feel for it. But I don't, do that for all of it, just so I've said it. So Notebook LM is great for the audio summaries, etc. I'm quite a kinesthetic learner. I like to engage with different multi-modules of learning. So that's good. And I'm doing some agentic stuff as well, but I'll stop there. Otherwise I'll just go on. But those are the main tools.
There's just never enough time, is there, Joe, for all the reading and all the learning of the algorithms and the tools and the platforms and everything. When it's supposed to help you be more productive, you have to learn how to use it properly and most efficiently as well. So there's always that too. But a question here: what's one hard or soft skill you think PR pros should prioritize over the next 2 years in this evolving world? Monique, do you have any thoughts on that one yourself? Any soft or hard skills?
I don't know whether this would fall into to soft or hard skills, maybe more so on hard skills. I think it's just learning how to augment yourself with AI, like learning how, like making sure that sort of like, AI is almost like your shadow, utilizing it to do the things, the admin, the bits that don't require interpersonality, human connection, so that you can do what you need to do and take on opportunities, because like I'm not going to say like AIs will do your washing or whatever, but it will do the bits that no one wants to do. Speaking from like a junior perspective, like the admin, the reporting, get AI to do that, so that when you come to do like a pitch, or when you're looking at, okay, how can I get a certain narrative in media, you have more time to brainstorm, to think creatively, to do sort of like tailored outreach. So I think it's just really about learning how to work with AI, but not in the sense of that it's standing side by side with you. I genuinely think it should be the shadow. It should be something that backs you up, because I do think sometimes we fall into the habit of relying on AI too much to do our communications, and then to Sal's point earlier, it just sounds like AI.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have to all be careful about that one. Sal, are there any skills your side that you think we should look at evolving over the next couple of years?
I mean, again, if you haven't embraced AI, Gen AI, start there. Understand where the engines are pulling information, understand how you can get your clients more visible. Because again, if you can show that you're doing this, you can clearly demonstrate to them, you're just really showing the value of your work. And so, that's always going to be useful to any client.
Mm-hmm. Brilliant. Another question as well we've had in the chat. So since COVID, I found it increasingly difficult to reach journalists who often work from home. What advice can the panel give? And I wonder whether this question is layered with an element of how might AI be able to help reach this new audience. So Monique, Joe, I don't know if you have a thought on this one. Any advice in this greater context of algorithms and audience, how we can better reach journalists and understand what they want to be talking about, or even just to get that first foot through the door?
Yeah. Sorry, shall I weigh in first?
Yeah,
Please
go ahead.
So I run a media literacy course with a publishing house, right? So this comes up quite a lot, and it kind of links back to what I was saying before about the media is in a bit of flux right now. So if you're trying to get your stories published as earned for free, then you've really got to know what this magazine covers, what they see value in, that goes beyond what your client's message is, right? I know that's kind of going back to basics really, but these editors have always received loads of emails from my PRs, and a lot of it's been crap in the past, right? And now it's a tsunami of crap that they have to wade through, because people are using these tools not very well, and they're just sending absolute nonsense. So editors, I mean, I know quite a lot of them. One of them said they used to get 400 emails a day from PRs, and you have to wade through it. And now it's like almost, you just can't can't do it, right? And also it's a lot of the thing with using Gen AI, if you're using it, is it raises the floor for the poor writer. So if you're a poor writer, Gen AI use will make you a better writer. But the research suggests that if you're a good writer and use Gen AI, it's not going to improve your standard of writing. It's just going to bring you down on this sort of average plane where you and your competitors and everyone is saying the similar thing in the same way, right? So we're kind of up against that too. So if you really were trying to cut through with the media, one, really know what excites them, what new views you can bring, what's newsy, original, credible, research-led. And this is another thing to be mindful of. Everyone's got a survey, and usually the company commissioning the survey is doing it for a reason. So if that is so obvious that there's commercial intent, you're going to get scrapped. So it's really thinking about the storytelling piece. And to get their intention, do you know what? I would go back to a good old-fashioned phone call, have a conversation, talk about this story as you would talk about it at a coffee shop or down the pub, because that's the bit that's missing. I think a lot of people rely on email, and don't get me wrong, some journalists don't want to be called, sure, but hey, if you try it out, perhaps you get your foot in the door and you can have that conversation. And I'd also suggest suggesting a lunch, wine and dine them, get to know them a bit, do the people bit that PR is good at, because at the moment, relying on email, relying on just the written word, it's going to be a lot harder to get that cut through because of all those pressures. And so that would be my advice.
There you go. Take them out for lunch, give them a call. What's the worst that can happen? Great advice there. Monique, did you have anything else to add on that point? Otherwise, we've got time for one more question.
The only other thing I would add is one thing we use at Milk and Honey is Roxhill. And I find that to be sort of super useful. It has its own built-in AI tool where you can ask it questions and it will tell you things about the journalist, or it will have their headlines there. So I think, especially being sort of in a more junior position than the individuals on the panel, I think for me it's very easy to think about sort of how difficult it can be to reach journalists, but also the fact that you're pitching so many people, your brain has to retain their beat, what they like. So using the likes of Roxhill, or even using the likes of Claude or ChatGPT, and taking information from their recent pieces to just give you a summary of, okay, what's their beat, what are they interested in, and then using that as a hook when you're reaching out to them. I find that specifically as well, because I'm neurodiverse, really useful for sort of digesting information and understanding, at least on the surface level, what a journalist is interested in, and finding a gateway in.
Brilliant. Thank you, Monique. Really interesting take. We've got one more question that we'll get through in the next minute. The last one here is, everyone's worried about jobs at the moment. Will AI reduce entry-level opportunities in PR, or will it create entirely new ones? We talked about opportunity just very briefly earlier. Does anyone have a quick thought on this one?
Yeah,
go Sal.
You go first.
You go first.
Okay, so I unfortunately see that at the entry level, the AI is taking a lot of that role. A lot of the stuff that entry level people were doing in the past can be automated, unfortunately. So now it's figuring out how those entry levels need to reskill.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I would just agree with that. I've done a lot of research in this actually, and I was at the Westminster Employment Forum late last year. So entry level roles, well, across the board in the UK, unemployment's going up. Without being a pessimist, this is the stats. It's about just over 16% now. It's very tough. I think most people could feel of that. I think the problem is AI is. I think AI is seen as a solution that can do the kind of the work that where you historically would earn your stripes and learn your craft. So it's sort of cutting that bit out. So yeah, I think entry level roles are going down for that perceived reason. The problem will be that very soon you won't have the people who are able to critically and creatively appraise what the AI systems are promulgating, because there's going to be a big old gap between those that have learned their craft and those that aren't even getting their foot on the ladder to do so. So I'm really hoping it won't be long until organizations realize this. There's also another expectation with entry level that you'll be required to manage an AI workforce as soon as you land on the job, right? You're managing a digital team. Well, how can you possibly manage a digital team without having learned the craft on the way to do that? So the onus is on employers to kind of ensure that those skills and those learning opportunities are open. And with the EU AI Act as well, I know we're not in the EU, but usually the EU is the precedent for what we do. There is the onus is on employers to ensure AI literacy amongst their workforce. So again, with those entry-level candidates, you're not just teaching them the craft of the profession anymore. You need to teach them how, a bit like everything we've covered, how you kind of integrate that technology into your day-to-day, and also more importantly, what makes the difference, what gives you the differentiator in terms of that human bit that you can add to your client or to your organization. So yeah, a lot of work for us to do on that front.
Absolutely, yeah. It's a really good point to end on. It's very much about the USP you can deliver to your clients in this increasingly evolving world of AI, GEO, AEO, and the like. But this has been really useful, a really productive session, fantastic, fascinating insights from everyone. Sal, Monique, Joe, many thanks for your time, and also many thanks for everyone that's been watching as well and tuning in, and all your questions. They've been brilliant. I'm sorry you didn't have time to go through all of them. I have a little chat on my side here with lots of questions coming in, but we have to leave it there. As I said, the recording will be available in a few days' time, possibly early next week, on the PRCA website. So do check it out. And all I can say now is thank you everyone again to the panelists for joining, to everyone else for joining and watching, and look out for the next event. But thank you very much and see you around.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.